What makes a man unhappy is the fact that he wants to be happy. This reflection by Arthur Schopenhauer, one of the most controversial philosophers in history, offers a harsh yet enlightening perspective on human existence. At first glance, his words may seem pessimistic, and indeed, many have misunderstood them. But hidden within is a precious invitation to see reality for what it truly is, stripped of illusions, and to face it with greater awareness. Schopenhauer's philosophy, rather than offering comforting answers, forces us to confront uncomfortable truths, truths that, once accepted, can transform the way we see life. But why, according to Schopenhauer, is life so deeply tied to dissatisfaction and suffering? And what can we truly learn from such an apparently dark vision? This video aims to uncover those answers, revealing how Schopenhauer's reflections contain timeless insights that can help us understand ourselves and the world around us. Enjoy. Schopenhauer was born in 1788 in Danzig, now Gdansk, Poland, enduring a time of immense historical, political, and cultural change. His life unfolded against the backdrop of the Industrial Revolution, the Napoleonic Wars, and the decline of Enlightenment rationalism, an age where old ideals clashed violently with new realities. He was born into a wealthy family, but his childhood was far from happy. The early death of his father and the emotional distance of his mother, who was more concerned with social life than his son's well-being, left deep marks on his soul. In response, Schopenhauer retreated inward, seeking refuge in study and contemplation. His youth coincided with the intellectual transition from the Enlightenment, which placed faith in reason and progress, to Romanticism, which celebrated emotion, nature, and individuality. This clash of ideologies shaped his entire philosophical journey. From an early age, he displayed a relentless desire to understand the human condition in all its depth and contradiction. After briefly studying economics to please his mother, Schopenhauer immersed himself fully in philosophy, the true passion of his life. At the University of Göttingen, he encountered the ideas of Plato, Aristotle, and, most profoundly, Immanuel Kant, whose work forever changed his intellectual direction. But Schopenhauer didn't stop there. He also drew from Eastern philosophy, especially Buddhism and Hinduism, integrating their spiritual insights into Western thought. This rare fusion gave birth to a worldview unlike any other, one that placed will and desire at the center of existence. Through this synthesis, he developed a disenchanted view of reality. He rejected the Enlightenment's optimism and its blind faith in progress. For Schopenhauer, history was not a steady march toward improvement. It was an endless repetition of conflict and pain, driven by what he called the will to live, a blind, irrational force that compels all beings to desire endlessly. In 1818, he published his masterpiece, The World as Will and Representation, where he laid out his entire system of thought. Yet at the time, his ideas went largely unnoticed. The intellectual world was dominated by figures like Hegel, whose vision of progress and dialectical optimism stood in opposition to Schopenhauer's bleak realism. This neglect bred in him a growing disdain for academic philosophers and the world of intellectual fashion. He withdrew from public life, choosing instead to live in solitude, continuing to write and refine his ideas in silence. Ironically, recognition came only in his later years. Thinkers and artists such as Friedrich Nietzsche and Richard Wagner found deep inspiration in his work. His influence began to spread, shaping modern thought in ways he could never have imagined. Schopenhauer died in 1860, leaving behind a legacy that still challenges us today. What seems like pessimism in his philosophy is in truth an invitation to see life clearly, to confront its pain without illusion, and through that clarity, discover a deeper form of meaning. Now let's explore the heart of his wisdom. 9 timeless reflections that continue to resonate across generations. The first reflection invites us to free ourselves from the weight of other people's judgment. How often do we act not out of genuine desire, but to gain approval? This constant hunger for validation breeds anxiety, insecurity, and emptiness. Schopenhauer reminds us, living to please others is a prison. True freedom begins when we follow our inner truth, not the expectations of society. In our age of social media, where comparison is constant, this message feels more relevant than ever. Authenticity is a rare act of courage. The second reflection is about suffering, the core of existence. Schopenhauer doesn't ask us to ignore pain, he asks us to understand and accept it as inevitable. This idea echoes Eastern wisdom, especially Buddhism, which sees suffering not as a curse but as a path to growth. When we stop resisting pain and instead look it in the eye, it becomes a teacher. Through suffering, we learn humility, compassion, and awareness. We begin to understand not only our own struggles, but those of others, forming deeper, more authentic connections. The third reflection concerns the nature of reality. What we perceive, Schopenhauer says, is never objective truth. It is our own interpretation, filtered through desire, emotion, and experience. Every person lives within their own version of the world. Understanding this helps us become less reactive, less rigid. It opens the door to empathy, reminding us that reality is always seen through a lens, and no one's lens is perfect. In the fourth reflection, he examines desire. The will to live endlessly drives us toward new goals, an infinite cycle of wanting. Each desire fulfilled gives a brief rest before the next takes its place. We chase satisfaction like a mirage, running on a wheel that never stops. For Schopenhauer, happiness is not a permanent state. It is a pause between two desires. Recognizing this helps us question what we truly need and whether our endless wanting hides a deeper emptiness. The fifth reflection urges us to rediscover simple pleasures. Modern life glorifies ambition, success, and achievement, yet real serenity often lies in life's smallest moments: a good book, a quiet walk, a melody that stirs the soul. These moments cost nothing, yet they reconnect us with presence. Schopenhauer reminds us that peace is not found in having more, it is found in needing less. The sixth reflection highlights the importance of health. He wrote, 9/10 of happiness depends on health. No wealth or fame can compensate for a troubled mind or a weakened body. Schopenhauer's message is simple, yet profound. Take care of yourself. Your physical and mental well-being are the foundation upon which all else stands. The seventh reflection explores the tension between will and intellect. The will, irrational, instinctive, drives our actions. The intellect comes later, trying to rationalize what the will has already decided. This explains why we sometimes act against our better judgment. Understanding this inner dynamic helps us forgive ourselves. We are not creatures of pure reason. We are driven by deeper forces. Awareness of this truth allows for self-acceptance rather than self-condemnation. The eighth reflection draws again from Eastern thought. Detachment from desire and acceptance of suffering are not signs of weakness, they are acts of strength. Instead of being crushed by pain or enslaved by desire, we can learn to observe them. By doing so, we find an inner calm born not from victory, but from understanding. And finally, the ninth reflection compares life to a work of art. Living, Schopenhauer says, is not merely existing, it is creating. Each day is a brushstroke on the canvas of our lives. Some brushstrokes are bright, others dark, but all are necessary to form the full picture. We cannot erase pain, but we can integrate it. Just as shadows give depth to a painting, difficulties give meaning to our experience. The goal is not perfection, it is harmony. Moments of joy, no matter how brief, are sparks that illuminate the greater picture. They are not to be chased, but cherished. In the end, the beauty of
What makes a man unhappy is that he wants to be happy. These few words by Arthur Schopenhauer, a man often called the philosopher of pessimism, sound almost cruel at first. But behind their harshness hides a deep truth, one that challenges the very way we understand life and happiness itself. Schopenhauer didn't write to comfort, he wrote to awaken. He believed that to truly live, we must first dare to look at reality, without masks, without illusions, without lies. His reflections, though dark on the surface, invite us to see existence with clarity, and to find peace not by escaping suffering, but by understanding it. In this video, we'll explore the essence of his philosophy, why he believed human life is bound to dissatisfaction, and how that realization can actually lead us to wisdom. Arthur Schopenhauer was born in 1788 in Danzig, today's Gdansk, Poland. His lifetime unfolded during an age of great transformation, the Industrial Revolution, the Napoleonic Wars, the decline of Enlightenment rationality, and the rise of romantic emotion. He came from a wealthy family, but wealth brought him no comfort. His father's early death and his mother's coldness left deep emotional wounds. While others sought solace in society, he withdrew into silence, into books, into thought. His pain became the foundation of his philosophy. As Europe moved from the optimism of the Enlightenment to the passion of Romanticism, Schopenhauer stood in between, skeptical of both. He saw the world not as a place of progress, but an endless cycle of desire and disappointment. He studied philosophy at Göttingen University, where Kant became his greatest influence. Yet he didn't limit himself to the West. He was among the first European philosophers to study Buddhism and Hinduism, weaving their insights into his own system of thought. From this blend emerged his central idea that will, a blind, restless force, drives all of existence. Every living being, from human to animal, is caught in its grasp, endlessly craving, endlessly suffering. In 1818, he published his masterpiece, The World as Will and Representation. It almost went unnoticed. The world was too busy praising thinkers like Hegel, who promised hope and progress. Schopenhauer, in contrast, gave none. He offered truth, cold, honest, and uncomfortable. Rejected by academia, he retreated into solitude. But time proved him right. Decades later, his ideas inspired minds like Nietzsche, Freud, and Wagner. By the time he died in 1860, his once ignored philosophy had become a cornerstone of modern thought. For Schopenhauer, to live is to struggle. Our very existence is shaped by desire, and desire, by its nature, can never be satisfied. When we don't have what we want, we suffer. When we finally get it, we grow bored and then begin to crave something else. Thus, life becomes a pendulum, swinging endlessly between pain and boredom. But his goal was never to make us hopeless, it was to help us see clearly. Because once we understand this mechanism, we can stop expecting life to be something it's not and start living it as it is. The first lesson he gives us is simple, but difficult. Stop living for others. How many times do we change ourselves just to be accepted? How often do we perform for approval? This endless search for validation traps us in anxiety and self-doubt. True freedom, Schopenhauer reminds us, begins when we no longer care about the judgment of others. To be authentic, to be yourself despite the noise, is an act of rebellion. The second lesson is about suffering. Schopenhauer doesn't say avoid it, he says understand it. Pain is not an error in life, it's a fundamental part of it. Just as shadows give shape to light, suffering gives depth to human experience. When we accept this truth, pain transforms. It becomes a teacher. It teaches humility, compassion, and gratitude for the moments of peace we do have. His third lesson reminds us that reality is not objective. Each of us sees the world through a personal lens, colored by our memories, desires, and fears. Two people can live the same event, but experience two entirely different realities. Understanding this helps us become less reactive, less judgmental. It's not about escaping illusion, but recognizing that we all live within one. The fourth reflection focuses on the trap of desire. The more we chase, the emptier we feel. Every fulfilled desire gives birth to the next, like waves hitting the shore, never resting. Schopenhauer compared it to being on a wheel that never stops spinning. True peace, he says, comes not from fulfilling every desire, but from freeing ourselves from their endless pull. The fifth reflection invites us to rediscover simple pleasures. Our world celebrates success and speed, yet serenity often hides in the smallest of moments: a quiet walk, the warmth of sunlight, the beauty of music, the calm of solitude. These moments are not grand, but they are real. And unlike fame or wealth, they don't vanish when the world turns its back. The sixth reflection reminds us of something we often forget. Health is everything. 9/10 of happiness, Schopenhauer said, depends on health. Without it, nothing else holds value. He urges us to protect both body and mind, to nurture the very foundation of our existence before chasing anything else. In his seventh reflection, he speaks of the eternal conflict between will and intellect. Our will, the emotional, instinctive force, drives most of our actions. Our intellect merely justifies them afterward. That's why we often act against reason, because reason doesn't lead, it follows. Recognizing this truth helps us forgive ourselves and others. We are not machines of logic. We are creatures of desire, trying to make sense of our impulses. The eighth reflection draws again from Eastern philosophy. Detachment, he says, is not indifference, it's liberation. When we stop identifying with every emotion, every craving, every fear, we begin to experience a stillness that cannot be taken away. Pain will still come, but it will no longer control us. And finally, the ninth reflection, perhaps the most beautiful one. Life, Schopenhauer says, is like a work of art. Each moment is a brushstroke on the canvas of our existence. Some strokes are dark, others radiant, but every single one matters. We cannot remove the pain, but we can turn it into depth, into texture, into meaning. Just as an artist uses shadow to give shape, we can use suffering to give our life substance. True wisdom lies in accepting the whole picture, the light and the dark, as part of one harmonious creation. Schopenhauer's philosophy is often labeled pessimistic, but perhaps it's the opposite. He doesn't ask us to despair. He asks us to see clearly. He doesn't destroy hope. He replaces false hope with understanding. Because when you stop expecting life to be happy, you begin to find something deeper than happiness: peace. So tell me, do you think Schopenhauer was a pessimist, or was he the only one brave enough to tell us the truth about life? That's all for now. Until next time, stay aware.
The Illusion of Happiness. Schopenhauer's Warning to Modern Man. What if everything you were taught about happiness was a lie? What if the more you chase it, the further it runs away? Arthur Schopenhauer, one of the most unsettling yet enlightening philosophers in history, warned us about this centuries ago. He believed that the human pursuit of happiness is not a path to peace, it's the very root of our misery. At first, this sounds dark, maybe even hopeless. But as with all of Schopenhauer's reflections, behind the shadow lies a powerful light, an invitation to see the world clearly, without illusions, and to free ourselves from the endless wheel of desire that keeps us trapped. Schopenhauer's philosophy isn't a set of comforting answers. It's a mirror that forces us to confront uncomfortable truths, truths about why we suffer, why we feel empty even when we have everything, and how the constant hunger for more quietly devours our inner peace. To understand his warning, we must first understand the man who gave it. The making of a pessimist. Schopenhauer was born in 1788 in Gdansk, Poland, into a world changing faster than it could understand itself. The Enlightenment was fading, Romanticism was rising, and society was torn between reason and emotion, progress and despair. He grew up in a wealthy family, yet his childhood was anything but happy. His father, a successful merchant, was strict and distant. His mother, Johanna, a celebrated writer, cared more for social fame than for her son's heart. After his father's mysterious death, Schopenhauer withdrew into silence, into study, reflection, and solitude. While others celebrated the dawn of progress, Schopenhauer saw something else, a world blinded by illusions of success and happiness, chasing pleasure while running from the truth of suffering. At the University of Göttingen, he immersed himself in philosophy, studying Plato, Aristotle, and above all, Immanuel Kant, the man who taught him that reality is never as it seems. But Schopenhauer went further. He combined Western logic with the mysticism of the East, Buddhism, Hinduism, the idea that life itself is a restless cycle of desire and pain. From this fusion, a new and unsettling worldview emerged. Life, he said, is driven by an invisible force, the will. An endless, blind, irrational energy that compels every being to strive, to want, to crave, and never to rest. The will, the source of all suffering. According to Schopenhauer, every human life is ruled by one law, the will to live. This will expresses itself as desire, ambition, longing, the endless pursuit of something we think will make us whole. But here lies the trap. As soon as one desire is fulfilled, another arises. The moment we get what we want, satisfaction fades, and a new hunger begins. We live caught between two states, pain when we lack something, and boredom when we have it. And so happiness becomes nothing more than a fleeting pause, a breath between two waves of longing. In Schopenhauer's words, life swings like a pendulum backward and forward between pain and boredom. He saw this clearly in his time, the Industrial Revolution promising a new age of comfort, yet breeding only new desires, new comparisons, new emptiness. And if he were alive today, what would he see? A world obsessed with appearances, dopamine, and constant validation. Social media has turned comparison into addiction. We chase pleasure, success, followers, luxury, and call it freedom. But it is the same will wearing modern clothes. The false god of happiness. Schopenhauer rejected the very idea that happiness could be achieved. To him, the modern obsession with being happy is the greatest illusion of all, a lie that keeps humanity restless and blind. We are told, follow your dreams, be positive, you can have everything. But he would ask, why would you want everything when wanting itself is suffering? In his view, true wisdom begins when we stop trying to turn life into paradise and instead learn to see it as it is, imperfect, fragile, yet beautiful in its honesty. He didn't say we should live in despair. He said we should stop lying to ourselves about what life owes us. Happiness, for Schopenhauer, is not a permanent state. It's a brief moment of silence when the will, for once, is still. The art of seeing clearly. For Schopenhauer, philosophy wasn't an escape, it was a cure for illusion. He urged people to look at life not through the lens of wishful thinking, but through clarity. He said, what we call reality is not objective, it's a construction, filtered through our desires, fears, and beliefs. Each person creates a private world shaped by what they crave and what they avoid. To see clearly, one must detach from this illusion, to observe rather than chase, to understand rather than demand. It's not about becoming cold or emotionless. It's about freedom, the freedom to see life without the constant whisper of, I want. The freedom of detachment. Eastern philosophy deeply influenced Schopenhauer. From Buddhism, he borrowed the idea that liberation lies not in satisfying desires, but in letting them go. This doesn't mean renouncing life. It means ceasing to be its slave. When you detach from the will, when you stop identifying with every passing craving, you begin to experience peace. Not the noisy pleasure of success, but the quiet serenity of acceptance. To him, the wisest man is not the one who has conquered the world, but the one who has conquered himself. The man who no longer runs from suffering, but faces it with calm eyes. The man who knows that even in pain there is dignity, because he no longer expects life to be otherwise. Art, compassion, and the escape from the will. Yet Schopenhauer was not without hope. He believed that there are rare moments when the will falls silent, when desire stops. These moments, he said, are the only true glimpses of peace. They come through art, music, and compassion. When you lose yourself in a symphony, a painting, or in genuine kindness, for a brief moment you stop being the center of your own world. You no longer desire, you simply perceive. That, to him, is the closest thing to happiness we can know, a quiet mind, free from the endless whisper of wanting. The courage to accept life. Schopenhauer's vision was not meant to depress, it was meant to awaken. He wanted humanity to stop chasing illusions and start living consciously. He wrote, "A man can be himself so long as he is alone." In solitude he found truth, away from noise, away from expectation. But today, solitude terrifies us. We fill every silence with screens, every pause with noise. But in doing so, we lose the one thing that could save us, awareness. Schopenhauer teaches us that life will never be free from suffering. But suffering need not destroy us. It can purify our perception, humble our pride, and bring depth to our being. To see life clearly, to accept it without illusion, that is the beginning of wisdom. The final reflection. So what was Schopenhauer really warning us about? Not about pain, but about the false promise of endless happiness. He wanted us to see that peace doesn't come from adding more to life, but from wanting less. To live with awareness, to find stillness amid chaos, to appreciate the fleeting beauty that exists not in the things we want, but in the moments we stop wanting. Schopenhauer may seem harsh, but his message is strangely liberating. When you stop chasing happiness, you begin to understand peace. So, the next time you feel restless, empty, or unsatisfied, remember his words, whispered across centuries. What makes a man unhappy is that he wants to be happy. And perhaps